as you can probably tell from the hooded figure on the screen, I'm going to talk about security. But before I do, it's customary to start with a quick introduction. So I'm Neal Michie. I'm here representing a company called Verimatrix. Verimatrix is a security company providing tools and products across a number of different markets and industries. And mobile development is one of our key focus areas. As I said, I'm going to talk about app security. Though we're going to turn things around slightly, and I'm not going to stand here and tell you how important it is to use great security in your products, which it is, but we're actually going to look at it from the bad guy's point of view. We're going to look at it from the hacker's viewpoint and start to show you how they think, how they operate, kind of what they see when they see your app and what they want to get out of your application. By way of definition, I think it's important to recognize that the word hacker is used in lots and lots of different ways, and it means different things. So in this context, as I'm sure you can guess, when I say hacker, what I mean is someone that wants to attack your application, someone that wants to do something malicious to the application and to the ecosystem that your app's running in. So that's what we're going to look at. And we're still streaming in, which is good. So before I dive into thinking like a hacker, I think the first thing I want to ask is, who in the room develops mobile applications? Show of hands. Not unsurprising, everyone. And out of the people in the room, who protects their application today? 1, 2, 3. Yeah, not very many. So hopefully we can change that by the end. And we'll see where we get to. So if we want to get into the mindset of the hacker, we want to understand how they think, how they operate. What any good actor will tell you, what any criminal detective will tell you. If you want to get into the mindset of someone, you first have to understand their motivation. If you're going to get into character, we need to understand what their motivation is, what they're going to thinking. And actually for a hacker going after an application, there's different motivations, there's different type of hackers that are driving what they're doing for different reasons. And if we just focus on one type, then we leave open vulnerabilities. So we're going to look at 4 different types of hacker, what their motivation is when they see your application. What are they looking for? Our first is the academic hacker. These are people that are doing it for the kudos. They're trying to find something that is theoretically possible, a vulnerability within your code, a weakness, that they can publicize. And their motivation is really the kudos they get from their peers of finding something interesting. So they want to spread it wide. They want to tell people about what they've found. This could be pure academics working in a university. It could be security consultants. It could be people like our own internal security lab at Verimatrix. Or it could just be people out playing in their bedrooms, trying to find vulnerabilities because they enjoy doing it. But they're looking for the kudos. They're looking for that recognition of what they do. Why is this a problem for you? These aren't people that are going out and going to defraud your system for millions of dollars, but they are going to publicize it. And publicity of weaknesses gets picked up by the media. They love seeing academic research that says this app is weak. And that leads to brand damage to your applications. People stop trusting what you're doing and how you're doing it. So that's our first type of hacker. Our second type is really the exact opposite. It's the criminal. They're not doing it for the kudos. They don't want publicity. If they get publicity, they end up in jail. So they want to keep secret. And what the criminal is doing is very simple. They're doing it for the money. And like anyone that's doing it for the money, they need to get a good return of investment of their attack. And that means they need an attack that can scale and generate lots and lots of revenue. Criminal attackers, criminal hackers are well-resourced. They're bright, they're intelligent people. That resource needs a return, just like any business. So the obvious risk to anything criminal is fraud on the ecosystem. We've got an example here from 7-Eleven in Japan, where there was lots of fraud on an ecosystem through a weak mobile application. So that's the first problem, is fraud. But there's also increasing legislation around privacy, keeping consumer data safe. So we've got GDPR in Europe. California is introducing very strict privacy legislation, and you see that repeated throughout the world. So breaches of legislation result in expensive fines, they result in getting hauled up to answer to yourself. And it also means you've got to take expensive reactionary measures. If you do put your security in after the event, it's always more expensive than doing it beforehand. And of course, there's still that reputational damage. Often the long-term impact of any fraud is not the fine, it's not the money that was taken at the time, but it's the long-term damage to your brand, to your product. And that's only going to become more so as privacy legislation like GDPR means that you've got to publicize, you've got to actually say publicly when you've had a data breach. So there's no keeping that fraud secret anymore. You've got to publicize it. If we move on further and away from our criminal organization, kind of the next type of hacker is someone that is kind of working very legitimately in their sense. It's a government or law enforcement agency. And quite simply, they're looking for intelligence. They're looking for information that they believe can help protect their citizens, their countries, from who they deem to be their enemies. And kind of the argument here is these are people that believe the end justifies the means. So if we are looking at reputational damage, they don't care about that because they're looking for making sure that they get the intelligence they need. But your users still feel spied on. They don't feel the ends justified the means. And the reason they don't feel that is because it's often a matter of perspective. What's one person's ends justified the means is another person's, well, that's terrible, that's kind of really, a government should not be doing that. So it's often a matter of perspective, and that creates breaches in trust, breaches in reputational damage, which, as we've said, leads to the long-term impact on your ecosystem. And of course, you can't just let the good governments in, whatever that means. If there's a weakness in your code, then you're going to let in the bad governments as well, the ones you really don't want to. So it's much better to work formally within the legal frameworks and not allow the governments to go and hack your code, hack your application. Our final type of hacker is what I'm calling a freeloader. These are people that 20 years ago would take that shiny CD and copy it onto tape so they could listen to the music for free. The only trouble is now, what they're looking to do is stream movies free from Netflix while cheating in the latest online game. So they ruin the revenue stream of the content providers, the movie services. They ruin the revenue stream of an online game. Because if you look at the revenue that a game makes, it's all very well. It makes lots and lots of money until it stops being fun, until people start cheating in it. And as soon as that concept of fair play disappears from the game, people stop playing it. They go and play the next big game. So freeloaders really damage your revenue stream, kind of either directly or indirectly by damaging the ecosystem. The other problem that freeloaders have is in the old days when they just copied a CD, it was one piece of piracy. Our example here, the freeloaders found a way to get movie content for free. They've then published it back onto a third-party app store, so everyone else can get movie content for free as well. So it's not just one piece of piracy now. Freeloaders are able to help everyone else help themselves. So as an attacker, as a hacker, why am I interested particularly in mobile apps? I mean, we're here at droidCon, we're here focusing at mobile apps. So why are we talking security? Why are the mobile apps themselves interesting? And very simply, they're interesting because they're soft. They're a soft target. And they're soft in lots of different interesting ways to an attacker. And the first is very simply, all code has bugs in it. No one has ever published a real piece of software that has bugs in it. I think someone once told me even a simple Hello World program has 20 vulnerabilities within it. So if you look at industry norm, for every 15 to 50 errors are found in 1,000 lines of code. So average smartphone application has about 50 lines of code. That's 1,600 errors sitting waiting to be discovered. Most are benign. Most are never noticeable by the users. Those that are tend to be functional and minor and don't really impact security. But there's always a few in there that are exploitable from a security point of view. So just the general nature of software, we call it a guaranteed vulnerability. It means that there's something there that's interesting to a hacker. Why are mobile apps particularly interesting? Because this applies to all software. Well, mobile applications are easy to reverse engineer. They're easy to find the vulnerabilities within them. It's also, as they're easy to reverse engineer, it's easy to find the secrets within the application. And all applications have different types of secrets in them because they're talking to a wider ecosystem. And we'll come on to what that means a bit later. And it's also easy to trick users into installing the wrong version of an application. So maybe they want the legitimate version, but they end up with an illegitimate version, a malicious version. And that's a type of attack we call a repackaging attack. And what you do in a repackaging attack is you take the original application, you crack it open, you pull it apart, you add some extra code into it, you add some malware into it, and you pack it back up together, and you republish it. And to the end user, that looks and feels like the genuine application, because 99% of the code within that application is legitimate, is genuine. The application is behaving as it should. It's talking to the backend services. If it's a messenger app, you can send messages to your friends, to your colleagues. If it's a video app, you can stream the content. If it's a banking app, you can view your transactions, you can make payments. The trouble is there's extra code in there that also means the attacker can view your balance and make payments on their own behalf. And historically, we've seen 85% of malware is delivered through a repackaging attack. There's academic research that says this is how you deliver malware. It gets harder to do that as Google gets stricter on their upload policies to the App Store. But we've got to remember we work in a global ecosystem. And with our North American or European mindset, we view Google Play as being the single source of content, the single source of apps. If you go wider in the world, there's lots of users that will download content from third-party app stores. Some countries, Google Play is a minor app store, and there's third-party app stores as the default source. So distributing a repackaged version is very easy, and then you trick users into downloading the wrong version. It appears to be better, or it appears to be legitimate. You call it the super gold version of your application. People don't want the standard, they want the gold, so they download the repackaged one. Mobile applications are also informative. Your app is how users interact with your ecosystem. That's important in two things. The first, if that's the interaction point, your users have to trust that it's the interaction point. They have to trust how they interact with your ecosystem. You're not going to trust a bank if the branch that you go into is falling apart and all the money's scattered around the floor. And it's the same in a mobile digital space. You've got to trust the way you interact with the ecosystem. And if your app is damaged, its reputation is damaged, then that trust is lost. But from the hacker's point of view, they don't care about that. What they care about is the application is trusted to access your network. And that information, how it accesses the network, is within the application. Come back to that in a second. The application also has to process and contain all the personal information that's required to access the ecosystem. If it's entered through the UI or it's displayed back to the user, it has to be within the application. So that's personal information there that our privacy legislation requires us to access. But that personal information is increasingly valuable to an attacker. It gets sold on the dark web for vast sums of money. And mobile applications are also self-documenting if you know where to look, if you know how to go after them. And the attackers do. They understand how to read your code. So we're talking about vulnerabilities within the code. We're talking about bugs. That's all there for the attacker to read and find. Once they find it, they can exploit it. So if I'm an attacker, your apps are very informative to me. They tell me what I need to know to make my attack. As I said, your application really knows how to talk to your ecosystem. And there's very few applications these days that run in isolation. They operate within a wider ecosystem. They talk to many back-end services. And the application contains the information to allow it to be trusted by those back-end services. IT departments are very, very good at building all the onion rings around a server. So if I'm an attacker, going after that server is hard. I've got to get through all those onion rings to get into the server. That mobile application is given trusted access through web service APIs. It's allowed straight in once it's authenticated itself and given trusted access. So as an attacker, if I can understand from your mobile application how to talk to the backend service, what the protocol is, how do I authenticate myself, what's the API key, what's the cryptographic challenge response that I need to do, then I look trusted to this backend service and I'm given trusted access. I don't need to attack the application, I just need to learn from it to get into the servers. So there's lots of information in there that really, as an attacker, is very valuable for me, not just for the mobile app attack, but actually to go after the wider ecosystem. It's very informative. And of course, your application contains lots of IP. That IP is very valuable because you spent a lot of time and effort developing it. You've not just knocked up your application in a couple of minutes and published it. You spent a lot of time thinking about your application, coding it, testing it, making sure it's a very valuable product to your users. And that effort you put in is recouped through uses of the application. You're monetizing this application somehow. And that's recouped through the uses of the application. So attackers will take that IP that you've put all the effort in, they'll lift it from the application, and they'll reuse it as their own. In extreme cases, they'll just take your application, change the logo on it, and republish it. And as we've been going through the different droidCon events over the last couple of months, we've had lots of people come up and talk to us about how they've found their application on Google Play under a different name, or they found some library that they spent a long time developing suddenly gets used elsewhere. So we don't want that to happen. We want to get rewarded for our effort. So we've talked about how the application's soft, but as an attacker, where do I start? Where do I really start to launch my attack? How do I do it? What am I looking for? Well, the boring news is we don't start with some big grand attack. We start small. We have to start by learning how this code operates, how it behaves. And we do that by reverse engineering the application. We want to take the application from the App Store, maybe via a phone, maybe directly, but we're going to get it onto a laptop, onto a desktop machine, onto a server somewhere where we can actually get into it and understand it. So we crack it open, we decompile the application, and then we can start to read the code. And that's not hard to do. When we put slide decks like this together, our marketing department asks that we put in lots of scary screenshots from the dark web showing attackers discussing exactly how they do this. The trouble with that, you don't have to go to the dark web. These are all free tools very quickly found just by searching on Google. Universities run courses on how to reverse engineer applications. So it's not difficult to find the knowledge to do this. The tools are freely available online. Even I can do this bit. So we get to the stage where we're reading the code. We're building a basic understanding of how the application is running through reading the code. Your application is a book, and the attacker wants to read the pages of the book to understand how it's running. And as we're reading, we're looking for interesting information. We're looking for things that jump out and tell us how this application is running, what's the story, anything interesting in there. It's an API key that I can quickly find. From the basic understanding, we want to go to kind of a strong understanding of how the application operates. And that means going from reading the book to playing the interactive video game. We want to get right into the application. We want to prod it, poke it, play with it, see what happens if we open this door over here. So we do that by going from our static analysis of reading into dynamic analysis where we're watching the code running. So we get the application, we put it on a a device that as a developer we wouldn't trust, but as an attacker is very useful because we can monitor the code running. So that may be a rooted phone, it may be an emulator, but it's something that's had the protections that the operating system provides broken down. We can attach a debugger to it so we can see what it's doing. We can stop the code at interesting points. We can go further and install what's called a hooking framework. And a hooking framework, something like Frida, allows you to take control of the application. So we've gone a long way from just reading the book. We're now deep into the code, controlling it, seeing what happens if we change this here or make the code execute from here. So we get a very strong understanding of exactly what the code's doing at any given time. Once we've got that, we're actually in quite a strong position to start to launch an attack because we know what the code's doing. For some of the threats that we looked at, so things like understanding how to talk to the back-end system, this is probably enough. We've already seen how it's building the messages, how it's encrypting them, how it's responding to challenges from the server. We can do that just by monitoring it running. So, as I say, for some of our attacks, this is fine. But for some of our attacks and some of the things we want to do, we need scale. If you remember our criminal attacker right at the start, he needs scale, he needs a return of investment. He's not getting scale by analyzing each individual application, making on-the-spot tweaks to it. He needs to go after the whole install base to get his scale. He's got to get a return on his investment. So we're not going after one installation of the application, because that's hard to do. The Android operating system provides good protection against that. And even if, as some of our customers find, 10% of their applications are running on rooted devices, we're still not going to get massive scale by going after individual applications, trying to run malware or do point attacks on those applications. We need scale by going after a big install base. Maybe that's providing a repackaged application and phishing users into downloading it. But probably the best way to get scale is not to touch the user's install of the application at all. Let them get the legitimate version from Google Play. But then we find a vulnerability within that version of the application that we can exploit remotely. And some of the examples we had at the start are doing just that. You reverse engineer the application, find a vulnerability, and then use that vulnerability remotely. So the sort of vulnerabilities we're looking for is things like buffer overflows, where we can execute code remotely on a phone. And given, as we say, it's not practical to squash any bug within the application, applications have what we term a guaranteed vulnerability. Then, as an attack, then to stop the attacker, you really need to stop the vulnerabilities being found. You need to stop this reverse engineering phase. So, if you remember our kind of deep learning phase that we went to understand the application, if we're going for scale, we want to find a vulnerability we can exploit remotely. This actually goes a bit further. It goes from just controlling the application to actually trying to identify vulnerability that we can run remotely. And the way we do that is what's called a fuzzing campaign. And a fuzzing campaign is basically forcing random data into the external interfaces of an application. So if you've got APIs in your application which can be called remotely, maybe you're a messaging application that you allow incoming phone calls to the application. So you've got to have an incoming data port on the application. Then that is vulnerable to an attack, because if that API that this phone call is coming into is not properly managed, it's not properly controlled, then there could be a vulnerability. And that vulnerability, as was found in WhatsApp, you get a buffer overflow, you execute code, that code can then be maliciously used within the application. So we run a fuzzing campaign once we've got control of the application using our attack to get a strong understanding of how it's working. And once we find that vulnerability, we can then use that information to craft an attack, to scale an attack against the application. So without even changing a version of the application, we can attack all the installs of that application because we find a vulnerability within the code that is exploitable. And that's dangerous for us as a user. It's very powerful for an attacker because they can see the vulnerability, they can see how to get to it. So as I say, we need to frustrate the attacker. And the way to frustrate the attacker is to stop them finding the vulnerabilities, to stop them even reverse engineering the application in the first place. And there's different techniques that people use to do that. And when asked who protects their application, you're almost certainly using some or all of these techniques. So the first technique, which probably most of you have heard of, in fact, let's find out. So who's heard of obfuscation? Most of the room, good. So obfuscation is a good way of stopping people reading your code. If I stretch my analogy of your application being a book that the attacker's reading, then what obfuscation does is it makes some of the text really, really small, some of it super large. It puts it all in a very obscure font that no one can actually read. And then just for good measure, it shreds the book. All the information is still there, but it's now very, very hard for the attacker to find it, to read the book. So that's good. We've stopped the attacker straight away. Well, not really. This is a real example of a banking application that we were asked to look at by one of our customers. And before we protected it, they thought they were obfuscating it with some simple obfuscation. There's free tools online that all that information they thought they'd stripped out, it's all put back in again. So that package Q, which looks very innocuous and meaningless, within 5 minutes of analyzing the application, our security lab discovered that it's actually the SSL socket factory. So now we've found something interesting. Now we've found the entry point to the encrypted networking traffic. We can get to the data before it's encrypted. If we want to understand the protocol that's used to talk to backend services, we've just found the best place to start looking. It only took 5 minutes. So maybe obfuscation on its own is not enough. So we said obfuscation stops the basic understanding, but it's probably not enough. How do we stop that good understanding, the dynamic analysis that we talked about? Well, dynamic analysis involves getting the code running on a device that the attacker trusts and can analyze the code, but you as a developer wouldn't trust. Well, we can use something called environmental checks. These are looking for clues that the application is running somewhere it shouldn't, that it's running on a rooted phone, or it's running on an emulator. Someone's attached a debugger to it. Seems good, seems logical. Go back to our same banking application. We very quickly found the method call where we're checking if it's running on a rooted phone. It doesn't take very long to remove that line of code and rebuild the application. Suddenly we're running on a rooted phone. If you remember our freeloader right at the start, one of the most common attacks that you see from a freeloader is someone's provided an application that they don't want to run on a rooted phone. 10% of a user base has rooted phones. That's 10% of people that are a bit annoyed they can't run it on their rooted phone. Only takes one of them to find the call, remove it, rebuild the application, and then it's running on a rooted phone. And they'll publish it for other people to find the APK. So all that effort to stop it doesn't take someone very long to remove it and make it available to everyone else. We've probably also found a good phishing attack for a repackaging attack as well. Maybe we'll not just remove the root detection, but we'll add something malicious into the application as well, oblivious to the user. So our obfuscation didn't last very long. It's a good barrier to an attack, but it's not really what we need. Our environmental checks, another good barrier, but again, it wasn't something which lasted very long in the hands of a skilled attacker. So what we need to do is make sure these good barriers stay within the code base, that they don't get removed by the attacker. And that's a technology that at Verimatrix we call anti-tamper. And anti-tamper anchors the other protections you're building into your application. And how it does this is it makes sure your code executes as you intended it to. Someone can't change the code. We build a network throughout your code that's constantly checking that while the code's running, that nothing's changed within the code. So as an attacker, if I de-obfuscate it, make the code readable again, That's fine, maybe I can read it, but I can't run it like that. If I've removed the root detection, it's not going to execute. The whole point of removing the root detection was to get it to execute on a device, but now I've broken the whole application. So this anti-tamper technology works with the other protections that historically we might have used to make it really strong, really well protected within the application, anchor it in there. And it goes further, because it then also stops any other changes, any other prodding or poking the attacker's going to do to your application to make sure it's strong, to make sure it stays within your application. If you put them all together, it's a technology known as app shielding. And app shielding contains these 3 different layers of protection. And it's a cliche that security is applied in layers, but it's also true that security is applied in layers. And you get those layers right, you get them working well together, it becomes much more than the sum of its parts and becomes a very, very strong, proven way of protecting applications. So we start with obfuscation, we add the environmental checks, but we make it really strong and really secure with the anti-tamper. And all I can kind of finish with is to say, well, I would urge you to try it out, to protect your applications, make sure they're secure, make sure you're frustrating the hackers. The easiest way for you to do that is to try out our Protect My App service that we launched earlier this year. It's a really simple, easy way to protect an application. It's a cloud service. You upload your application to us, you get it back protected, and really all you need is 5 minutes, an app. You all said at the start you've got an app. You need your work email address, and you get 30 days free trial with the Droid SF19 discount code. So there's really no reason not to try it and have a go and frustrate the hackers, stop them reverse engineering your application. If you want to learn more about any of this, we're up on the 2nd floor beside the entrance to the main auditorium where the keynote was this morning. Please come and talk to us. We're very friendly. We try and make security friendly and easy to access. We're also quite friendly ourselves. If nothing else, we have some free socks to give away. So come claim your free pairs of Protect My App socks. And all I need to do is leave you with the message that to remember, if your app is valuable to you and your users, it's going to be valuable to the bad guys as well. So please protect it. Thank you.